It took Harry 9 days to be certain, and he enjoyed the certainty more than he had enjoyed anything since the hat. The scar was an instrument. He had decided that the first night, and the rest was only learning to play it. He found that if he sat in the third row of Defense Against the Dark Arts rather than the back, the ache sharpened to a clean high note. If he leaned a degree toward the front of the room, it sharpened further. He moved his seat twice in a week, each time a little nearer, and watched Professor Quirrell over the rim of an unopened book, and triangulated the source of his own pain with the patience of a boy who had once spent a whole winter learning the exact tread on the stairs that meant Vernon was coming down angry, rather than merely awake. The man himself was a poor disguise, once you knew to look for the seam. Harry knew about seams. He had one of his own. A single hairline where the boy he showed the world stopped, and the Watcher began. And in the whole castle, only the Granger girl had ever caught a fingernail on it. So he understood, better than anyone alive, what he was looking at when he looked at Quirrell. A stammer too consistent to be a stammer, a flinch that arrived a half-beat after the thing that should have caused it, a man performing a smaller man for an audience he was afraid of. Harry had performed fear his whole life. He knew its weight in the mouth. Quirrell's fear was real, but it pointed the wrong way, not out at the room, but back over his own shoulder, at the thing he was wearing like a second coat. The turban, then. Whatever rode, the man rode high and close, and did not like to be still. On the 9th day, Quirrell kept him after the lesson on a thin pretext, a question about Harry's essay, fumbled and abandoned halfway, and the two of them stood a moment too long in the emptying classroom, and the scar sang so brightly that Harry's eyes watered, and he did not let them. He held the man's gaze the way he had held the Granger girls across the lamplit library. "I see you seeing me." And for the length of a single breath, behind Quirrell's wet, darting ordinary eyes, something else looked out. It was not a face. It was an attention. It moved across Harry the way Harry moved across a room, pricing, weighing, finding the power. And where it should have found a frightened child, the marked boy, the prophesied inconvenience, it found instead a small cold stillness, looking calmly back, unfrightened, interested. And the attention paused, the way a hand pauses on a stair it expected to find rotten, and finds instead made of iron. Then Quirrell stammered something about the door, and the moment folded shut, and Harry went out into the corridor with his heart going no faster than usual, and a single fact settling into place behind his eyes like a coin dropping into a slot. There was a man, and there was a passenger, and the passenger was weak. Not dead. The adults were wrong about that, all of them, with their lowered, careful voices, but not whole either. A thing that had to ride a stammering nobody and hide under a length of cloth and flinch when a first-year looked at it too long was a thing that had lost almost everything and was scrambling now in the dark of a borrowed skull to get some fraction of it back. Harry walked the length of the cold corridor, turning that over, and did not reach for a maxim about it, and did not need one. A weak master, he let the phrase sit there plain, without polishing it. There would be time to decide what it was worth. Outside, the first snow of the year had begun to come down over the lake, and Harry stopped at a window and watched it fall into the black water and vanish, flake after flake, each one certain of itself, right up until the moment it touched the surface and was gone. The older boys came for him on a Thursday, and afterward Harry understood that he had made his first real mistake, though not the one they thought they were teaching him. There were 3 of them, 5th and 6th years, and they caught him in the short stone passage between the common room and the boys' stairs, where the green light gave out and the torches hadn't been relit. He had known for a week that something like this was coming. The house had been holding its applause, weighing whether the famous orphan would be an asset to fly like a banner or an embarrassment to be quietly drowned. And the boys in the dark had clearly appointed themselves to find out which by the direct method. The largest of them put a hand flat on Harry's chest and walked him back into the wall, almost gently, the way you'd corner a dog you hadn't decided about.
"Potter," he said, "we've been wondering, are you anything, or are you just a scar somebody famous gave a cupboard boy?"
It was a good question. Harry had been wondering a version of it himself. He did not answer, and he did not struggle, and he made his face do the small, flat blankness he had worn through 10 years of Vernon. The no audience face, the nothing here to land on face. But underneath it, something had gone very still and very awake. Stiller and more awake than he had ever been, because the wall against his back had said a thing his whole body recognized. Here is a room where you are powerless again. And Harry had stood under a hat 2 months before and promised himself with the whole cold weight of his being that there would never be another one. He never decided to do what he did. That was the part he kept afterward and turned over and could not put down. There was a word in his mouth he had not learned. He was certain of it later. He went back through every book in his trunk twice, and it was in none of them, and yet it was there when he reached, sitting ready on his tongue like it had been left for him. And the shape of it was old and wrong and fit his mouth exactly. He did not so much cast it as let it go. The largest boy's hand was still flat on his chest when the passage filled with a sound like wet rope pulling tight, and the boy made a noise Harry had never heard a person make, and folded down onto the stones and did not get up. It looked to the two who ran like a spell badly aimed, and worse rebounded. That was the genius of it, and Harry hadn't planned a particle of the genius. There were no marks a matron could read. There was only a 6th year on the floor, with his eyes open and his breath coming in small, wronged gasps, and a 1st year standing over him with empty hands and that flat, blank cupboard face, saying nothing, while the torches guttered back to life one by one, as though the dark itself had only borrowed the corridor and was now reluctantly giving it back. Harry crouched by the gasping boy. He was curious. He could admit that to himself in the privacy where he admitted everything. He studied his own steadiness the way he'd studied the scar's ache, looking for the tremor a person was supposed to have after a thing like this, and not finding it, and noting the absence as one more fact about himself. And underneath the steadiness ran the question that would not leave him alone for the rest of the year, the one he could not answer and learned not to ask aloud. Was that me? Because it had felt like him, like the truest, coldest center of him, finally given a room to fill. And it had also felt like something else, something with its own grammar, moving through him toward a cruelty it already knew the shape of, a guest that had found the house unlocked and walked straight to the cupboard under the stairs as though it had lived there once. He could not separate the two. He turned the moment over and over in the green dark that night, the way he'd turned the scar. And the harder he looked, the less he could say where he ended and the thing he carried began. And he found, to his own mild interest, that he did not especially want to know. A door is a door, whether you built it or merely found it. What matters is that it opens. The house gave him his answer the next morning, and it was the one he'd wanted. Not asset, not embarrassment. The watchful girl from the feast moved her things, without a word, to the end of his table. Malfoy laughed too loudly at things that weren't funny. No one put a hand on him again. The mistake took 4 days to surface. He had assumed fear would keep the boy silent. He had read fear his whole life, and he was almost never wrong about it. And he was wrong about this. He had not yet learned that terror is a thing that leaks, That a boy frightened past pride will say more, not less, will go to the matron and then to his head of house and tell, in a small leaking voice, that there had been a word he didn't know in a dark that wasn't natural, and the Potter boy standing in it, like he'd called it up from somewhere. And so the thing Harry had made perfectly deniable did not need to be proven to do its damage. It only needed to be said by a frightened boy to a man already half listening for it. He felt the change before he understood it, the way Snape looked at him in potions that week. The hatred was still there, the old inherited grievance aimed at a dead man's face, but under it now was something new and far worse for Harry's purposes: attention. The potions master had stopped seeing James Potter's son and started seeing a question he did not like the shape of. Snape said nothing. Snape asked nothing. He simply watched Harry over the rows of cauldrons with the still, patient, sidelong watchfulness of a man who has found a single thread he does not remember leaving loose and has decided to keep his eye on it. And in a tower Harry had still never seen, an old man received a quiet word from his potions master and reread for the 100th time a letter he was certain he'd written differently, and this time, for the first time, took up a pen and did not write anything, and sat a long while with the nib drawing over the page. Power used, Harry understood at last, lying awake with the lesson, was power witnessed. He had spent a 6th-year boy to buy standing in his house, and the change had cost more than the standing was worth because it had been seen, and the people who had seen it were exactly the two in the castle he could least afford to interest. He filed the correction with no warmth and no self-pity, the way he filed everything. He had been clumsy. He would not be clumsy again. The next thing he did in the dark, he resolved, no one would be left alive to leak. It did not occur to him yet that this was a resolution with the body already attached to the far end of it.